The Braves are home for their home opener on Thursday, and we're going to be bringing in Javier Reyes from Locked On Padres to preview that series, which should be a fun one against a very good Padres team. So let's go ahead and bring in Javi. Javi, thanks so much for joining the podcast. Known each other for a while now. We haven't done one of these crossovers since I've joined the Locked On Braves podcast, so very excited to be doing this with you. Talking about what should be a very fun season, Javi. Or a fun series, but a fun season for both teams for sure.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely, man. I'm thrilled to be here. First of all, we talked about off air, the background, just absolutely killing it. Just truly phenomenal. The hats, the newspapers, the posters, whatever, just really good stuff. And it's funny. Yeah, it's been so long. I remember you telling me, hey, man, I think Corbin Burns is that good, that type of thing. And then Corbin Burns goes off and I'm like, yeah, this guy knows what he's doing. And I think you were actually the first guest I had on my podcast as well, or at least the first non-locked on host on my podcast. So that was a lot of fun. So we're really going full circle here, man. But I'm really thrilled because the Braves are just one of the more fun teams out there. They've been that way for a while. Even when they didn't win, they were still super consistent, and they have so much to talk about always. So I'm thrilled to be here, man, for the first, I think, series, at least for the Padres. I forgot who the Braves have played so far, but for the Padres this year of a giant, heavyweight matchup. And I think that's a lot of fun and I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it should be a really good one. And if you haven't already checked out Javi, make sure you do so at Javi Peno on Twitter, and make sure you check out Locked On Padres as well. He does a great job with the podcast over there. Very fun and entertaining is Javi as always. But Javi, let's jump into this series. It is the Braves home opener. They started the season on the road. You mentioned, not sure who they played. They played 3 at Washington against the Nationals. They won that series 2-1. And then they went to St. Louis, who predicted to win the NL Central. I think will be a very good team. And the Braves went in there and swept them. They played tremendously in that series. Maybe the best they'll play all year in terms of pitching, defense, offense. They really just had it all going for them in this series. But, this, like you said, for the Braves too, I think this is going to be perhaps their biggest test so far this season, as the Padres, picked by many and by Locked On hosts, picked to be the 1 and 2 teams in all of baseball this year, with the Braves being picked to finish first and the Padres second in those power rankings. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun. But give me your initial thoughts on the Padres, because I know they lost the first 2 games of the season to the Rockies, and they won the next 2, and then played a weird 2-game set against the Diamondbacks for whatever reason, and split that as well. So just give me your initial thoughts on the Padres here through their first 6 games.
I think so far with the Padres, it's really hard to judge the team in a lot of ways. It's hard to judge every team, but you have the, suspension of Fernando Tatis Jr. still. So that's still a giant cog in the lineup that's missing. And then you have, Yu Darvish only just made his first start. Joe Musgrove is still on the IL with his kind of weight room incident with his toe. So he should be back soon. It's not a long injury, but there's still that vibe of oh, we don't know everything's here. Robert Suarez, a great reliever. He's on the IL. So there's some things. I'm not making excuses, Jake. Don't get me wrong. But it is worth pointing out that it's been a weird start to the season. And I think that what has been expected and the strengths of the Padres have come out a decent amount. And I think that comes in the form of Xander Bogaerts, 3 home runs already. Granted, not necessarily the hardest hit in the world, maybe a little bit of batted ball luck, especially in Petco. But even still, it's been great to see him. He's ripping doubles. He looks great. And you just love that initial return on investment. You make this big splash signing in the offseason. Not that it's guaranteed to go the whole way, but it's just really cool. And it's a nice kind of omen, I think, for hopefully his first season with San Diego of many, for sure. And I think that with them so far, there's been also a lot of glaring flaws. The unexpected thing so far has been the bullpen. Everyone from Nabil Crismatt to Luis Garcia to Steven Wilson to an extent, all of their guys have kind of struggled, except for Josh Hader when he has come in, who's been a stud for a long time, even though he struggled with the Padres in the second half last year. Seems like that was just a weird blip, a weird, what was that type of season. For Hader. And then the expected thing, at least from my point of view, was been some really sloppy defense, some errors from Juan Soto, some weird stuff from David Dahl, who's replacing Tatis at the moment in the outfield, one of their replacements, some weird stuff at first base in the infield. So a weird, wacky defense because a lot of different Padres are playing different positions now. So aside from the moves they've made, Ha-Sung Kim, he's not playing short right now. He goes to second base. Jake Cronenworth, he's moving to first base. Juan Soto, he went from right field to left field. Just fundamentally, there's been a lot of different positional changes, and I think that might take some time to get used to for players. Even if I think they're more than capable of doing it, these are still very good players. In the case of Juan Soto, his defense has been under question. Why he was a Gold Glove nominee, certainly a question for a lot of people last year. But I think he at least can raise himself from bottom percentile to at least somewhere in the middle, I think, this year. But yeah, it's been a weird start. But you've seen the flashes. Juan Soto hit a blast in that first game against the D-backs. I already talked about Bogarts, and Manny hasn't even gotten going yet. He got going at an umpire for sure the other day. That was a lot of fun. But it still just feels like a team that's give it a few minutes. Give it a few minutes. You need Tatis to get back. You need Musgrove to get back. But I am definitely concerned about the defense. I think that's the only thing that if you told me 2 months from now became a problem, I would definitely believe that. I would not be surprised at all.
Yeah, because I mean, when you look at this Padres team and you look at all the money they've spent in the offseason and really going over the last 2 seasons, all the moves that they've made, which is really exciting. And I love it for Padres fans. I think it's great. But you do look at this offense and you think, man, Bogarts, Soto, Machado, when Tatis comes back, and you really think that will likely be the strength of this team. I mean, we as Braves fans look at that top 3 that we have in Acuna and Olsen and Riley, and I think the Padres, could be right there, if not even better. I think those are going to be 2 of the better top of the orders in all of baseball. But I like that you mentioned the defense because, and again, I don't watch the Padres every day like you do. I know the one game I did watch probably wasn't a great example because it was the Diamondbacks game where they were bunting, stealing bases. I mean, just playing small ball
Small
to
ball,
death.
man. Yeah, they small
And
ball this to oblivion.
it's not something we're used to seeing in today's game, but it is a big part of that. And I think the Braves could play that into their advantage with some of the speed that they have. So you do mention, some of the deficiencies and weaknesses that Padres team has, perhaps being the defense. I think that could play into the Braves' favor a little bit. But let's talk about the starting pitching here, because again, that for me was the question with the Padres. What do they have starting pitching wise? It looks like the Braves won't see Yu Darvish in this series, which I would assume is probably the Padres' best starter. But what do you think of the rotation? I know you said Musgrove's on the IL at the moment, but how do you see the Padres' rotation right now lining up, not just for this series, but long term? Are you high on the rotation? Do you think there's some work to be done there?
It's an interesting thing. I think that the way I look at rotations these days in a very condescending way is everyone needs more starters, right? Everyone could use more starters. I would say that I like, in different degrees. I don't think the Padres are at like DEFCON 4. They're at like 2 because there is a world in which they had really good luck on the health side of things last year. Yu Darvish is old. Blake Snell can be an issue there, and he doesn't always last super long into games. Joe Musgrove, I have no issues with. But then you bring in Michael Wacha, who I like the signing, but it's also worth pointing out that they're kind of bringing him in because they just need someone, right? You need a little bit more reliability. And even if he's at least a guy that can throw innings, got a little bit lucky with the Red Sox last year, at least if you go by expected stats. Whole run difference between his ERA and expected ERA. So that's worth pointing out. And then you have guys like Nick Martinez and Seth Lugo, who are primarily known as relievers, who are trying to be that 5th spot. So I don't think that they're like dying, because I still think that top 3 is really, really good when everything's going well. But there's definitely a universe which this could go wrong. And you saw 2 years ago in 2021 when it did go wrong, when Darvish was off, when Snell was off, when they had some injuries in the back end and they had to start Jake Arrieta in games. Now, years ago, that would have been great to start Jake Arrieta, but not anymore, right? So those are some problems. But so far, I think it's interesting because Seth Lugo's first start, he was electric. He was fantastic. 7 innings, only gave up a run. He struck out 7, didn't walk a batter. So it's possible. And I do like that Lugo had a lot of people interested in him in the offseason. That's always something I like to look at. It happened with Musgrove a few years ago when he was on the trade market. A lot of teams were rumored on him. I think that's a little bit of a good sign. Not saying he's a stud, not saying he's going to be a breakout like your boy Spencer Strider or anything like that. But it is worth pointing out that they at least have some interesting guys, more so than that 2021 team, that can at least provide for some depth. Maybe Ryan Weathers, who was like a rookie stud until he cratered. he can come back in. He had a pretty okay start. Velo was up on his slider, so that's kind of cool. There's at least hope, right? And I think that that's a far cry from the previous year, for sure. But there's definitely a universe in which this all goes wrong. That's a totally fair point, especially in the case of health, I think, for the Padres. But we'll see how it transpires, man. But so far, that hasn't been the biggest issue. It's been mostly bullpen. Come on, guys, get us through one inning safe. That would be really appreciated.
Yeah, no, again, when I just look at this roster again from an outside perspective, the one, I
Mhm.
guess, concern I had for the Padres coming into the season was just the starting pitching depth.
Mhm.
Like you said, if everybody's healthy and things go right, I think it could be a really solid rotation. But if that doesn't happen, and again, I don't know all the prospects as well as you or others do following the Padres, but I just felt like that could be one area of weakness on what should be a really good team regardless. And as a
Mhm.
Braves fan who watched Seth Lugo as a reliever for years with the Mets, to see him as a starter, that
Yeah.
threw me off a little bit. But as you said, did have a really good start with the Padres. And the Braves also get to avoid Tatis early in the year as well. They
Yeah.
face the Padres twice this year before Tatis comes back, which I think is a big advantage for the Braves for sure. But certainly when he comes back, I'm sure he'll give a big lift to the Padres. But next, we'll turn our attention to the Braves as we preview this series. Have Javi asking me some questions. Before we do that, for a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. If you're looking for a delicious tasting protein bar, Javi,
Mhm.
you already know where I'm going here. You
Mhm.
gotta try Built Bar. We tell you about them all the time. Built Bars are the best protein bar out there. Not only are all Built Bars covered in 100% real chocolate, but they're also high in protein, low in sugars. They are great for you. If you're a Locked On Braves listener, you know my favorite is the cookies and cream. But Javi, I'm eager to know, what is your favorite Built Bar?
I've been riding with Cherry Barcia since day one, man. What can I say? Love it.
Yeah, I would say that that suits you. That sounds about right there. So everybody's got their favorite. There's tons of great flavors to choose from over at built.com. So make sure you go there now to order yourself a box, or now you can even run out to Walmart or Sam's Club to get yourself a box right away. However you choose to get your Built Bars, make sure that you go grab some today. All right, Javi. Now into the next segment. We're gonna ask you. You're gonna have you ask me some questions for the Atlanta Braves as we continue to preview this series between the Braves and the Padres.
Look, man. Uh, Everyone talks about it with the Rays. Everyone talks about it with the Dodgers to an extent. Do you guys have like a pitching clone factory? Because every time I look up, it's like, oh, Ian Anderson. That's the guy. He seems like he had so much hype and potential a few years ago, and then some injuries fell his way. It's like, oh, don't worry, we just have this guy named Spencer Strider or whatnot, right? And it's just you have Charlie Morton still. You have Kyle Wright, who I think is on the IL right now, but it just feels like every time I look up, there's all these new pitchers and whatnot. But I am wondering, like, is the Braves like how much do you think that they can survive that stuff? Because I know Max Fried got hurt. I know that was on opening day too, so that wasn't a great start. Former Padre, love him, rooting for him. Very sad that he's not on my team. But still, I feel like this team has just so much depth. I mean, it's ridiculous. I actually think that maybe quietly they might have the best catching stuff in baseball, dare I say, because you also have Darnell as the backup somehow, which is wild to me. Like, I don't get it. Like, it's just, I don't know. I just think that the Braves, they did get that number one ranking. I personally would have had Houston, but it's a toss up. I don't really care. I'm just wondering, kind of with the Braves with this rotation, what do you think is the key for them? I guess for the rest of the season, because every time I look up, there just seems to be a new guy. And do you think that all those guys are legit, or are these just kind of flashes in the pan, dare I say?
So for Fried and Strider, I think they are both legit, top of the rotation. ace type, Cy Young type potential players. And my key, and I talked about this previewing the season, is having those two healthy for the postseason. And unfortunately for the Braves, that was not the case going into last year's postseason. And you saw it. Strider was coming off an oblique injury, hadn't pitched in over 2 weeks, and just ran out of gas against the Phillies in that series. Max Fried was coming off a major illness where he threw up his last time he was coming out of a game, had to come out early because he was so sick. So it's really just health. And I know that's the easy thing to say. And it's what we talked about with the Padres with their rotation. If they're healthy, I think they'll be fine. But for the Braves in particular, it's those two guys. If they're going to win in the postseason, I think for the Braves and the Padres, don't want to put the cart before the horse, but we're looking towards the postseason. It would be a big failure, I think, if either of these teams aren't in the postseason with all the wild cards that you have now.
Yeah.
And so looking towards the postseason for the Braves, in order for them to have success, I think they have to have Fried and Strider healthy, because those two, in my opinion, are legit top of the rotation arms. How it feels out behind them is somewhat of a question mark. Kyle Wright had a breakout season in 2022. Is that legit? He's already banged up to begin this year. We'll see what happens when he comes back, but I need to see it from him again over another full season to know that what he did last year is legitimately who Kyle Wright can be. Charlie Morton is Father Time catching up with him. He had a down year last season. He's getting close to 40. And as we're already kind of seeing with the Mets, two aces in their rotation, Father Time always wins. So that is a bit of a question mark. But to your point, this is tremendous depth that the Braves have, where they can start the season with Max Fried and Kyle Wright on the IL, and they can call up a Jared Schuster. They can call up a Dylan Dodd. They can recall a Bryce Elder, who pitched a great game on Wednesday against the Cardinals. This is the most depth that I've ever seen for a Braves rotation. And oh, by the way, Michael Soroka is working his way back, and he was a pretty good pitcher last time he was healthy. So there's just a lot of great depth in this Braves team in general, but a lot of the pitching staff as well that I think will help them get through a 162 game season. But again, the key for me looking ahead towards the postseason is Max Fried and Spencer Strider. They have to be healthy in order for the Braves to reach their goals in 2023.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds about right. I think that the Braves have been doing such a really good job at. Yeah, I mean, it even started when they won the World Series, where they've really rebounded despite having like this. I mean, 2021 was kind of almost like a year from hell in terms of just, you have Acuna get hurt, you have Soroka suffer the setback, all these things that they still push through and they keep making all these moves. I just think that Anthopoulos and that crew deserves credit for being really truly the best, I think, in the game right now in a lot of ways, not just because of the contracts and whatnot. I know a lot of people bring that up. You got Acuna on a really team friendly contract, for example, but just create Michael. Who the heck is Michael Harris? You know what I mean? Like I had no idea who this guy was, and now he's just this speedster who's got a lot of power and whatnot. He seems like he's going to be the next big thing. They extend him for a good contract. I guess my other thing would be are we sure the NL East is going to be that competitive? Like, are we sure? Because I know that the Phillies were in the playoffs last year, and this isn't me trying to jinx your team or anything like that, but Phillies, no Harper, it's just no Hoskins. That's a really flawed team defensively, and they were the worst team coming into the postseason last year. The Mets have all of the bad omens on the wall with Diaz, my beloved Diaz, Justin Verlander on the IL. Just bad vibes everywhere. I feel like a lot of people projected this division to be extremely tight. I am wondering if it really might not. And I don't know I just feel like there's no questions on this Braves team aside from maybe like Ozzy Albies and whether or not he should actually be a switch hitter, maybe just stick to one side. I don't know. That's just me. Just cursory glance at the splits every now and then. I'm like, this is a little odd, but I don't know, man. Do you think that this is kind of the Braves division to lose?
I mean, I think obviously a little bias here. I do think they're the best team, and I think they're the most complete team and have the most depth. It's kind of what we talked about in our NL East preview. But I do think the Mets and Phillies will be a good challenge. But I just think there's a lot more that has to go right for the Mets and Phillies to be that team than for the Braves. And
Mhm.
you've already seen it with the Mets. I mean, losing Edwin Diaz was a big loss for the Mets. You saw on Wednesday they lost a game late with their bullpen. I mean, Edwin Diaz was lights out. And a
Way
lot of
out.
times when the Braves played them, they'd bring Diaz in the 8th inning. And if you didn't have a lead by then, the game was over. That's unfortunately a big loss for them. The Phillies have lost Rhys Hoskins for the year, and they're without Bryce Harper right now. I mean, those are some big losses for those two teams. And I just think the Braves have more depth than those two guys if they do suffer injuries like that. Like I said, they're without Max Fried for the moment, and hopefully it is just for a moment. But I feel like the Braves have the depth to cover those types of setbacks, and I don't know that the Mets do. Now, the Mets have a couple of prospects in Beatty and Francisco Alvarez, who I
Right.
think are going to come up
Mhm.
and play a big role at some point. So I actually believe more in the Mets than I do the Phillies, but I think both are still going to be very good. I do think it's a tight race, but I do think the depth of the Braves gives them the advantage. But for the Mets, you're counting on a couple of 40-year-olds at the top of your
Yeah.
rotation to stay healthy all year and be effective. And when they pitch, they're really good, but that's a lot of hope riding on those two guys. Like I said with the Braves, in order for them to reach their goals, Fried and Strider have to be healthy come postseason time. It's the same thing for the Mets. In order for them to reach their goals, Scherzer and Verlander have to be healthy come postseason time. And I just think there's a better chance of that happening for Fried and Strider than it is for Scherzer and Verlander, just because of where they are in their respective careers.
Yep. I feel that. I feel that absolutely. I mean, that whole division in fairness is just like a fantasy team. It's just, oh, we'll bring in Trey Turner. We've got the Braves just find random guys. Not random. I know they were high prospects, but they just come up and then they're awesome. And then the Mets are like, whatever, we'll spend an extra 80 bajillion on all these guys. They bring in Senga. It's totally be overreacting and whatnot. But Jake, let me tell you something. Speaking of fantasy, let me tell you, man. Have you ever heard of So Rare? I think that's
I
how you
have
say
heard
them,
of them. Yeah.
hopefully. They're really, really cool. It's this brand new kind of fantasy baseball game that kind of transforms fans into owners with officially licensed digital cards featuring players from across all. That's right, all. I mean, you got to have all of them. All 30 MLB teams. And unlike other fantasy baseball platforms, So Rare managers truly own their fantasy experience. You collect, you buy, you sell, and compete with player cards against global opponents to win epic rewards. And win or lose, you still own your cards. So don't worry about losing them randomly. Don't worry that if you pull that Ronald Acuna Jr. diamond, triple, quadruple, platinum, ruby gem card, that if you lose, you're going to lose them. It won't happen. Don't worry. They got you covered. MLB game weeks happen twice weekly and span a 3 to 4 day cycle. At the end of game weeks, So Rare MLB managers who rank at or near the top of their leaderboards with a variety of rewards, which can include scarcity cards, game tickets, merchandise, signed jerseys, VIP experiences, like meeting MLB stars. Yes, that's right. You can meet your favorite players as well, guys. Prizes may vary, of course, depending on the competition, but still, that is pretty cool. If I haven't sold you already, well, go check it out. Head to sorare.com/locked on. That's spelled SORARE.com to draft your team of free player cards. Set your lineup and start competing today to win epic rewards. Again, that's sorare.com/locked on to start playing today.
All right. Well, thank you, Javi. And I have heard of So Rare, and it's a lot of fun. I started playing it. You've probably seen a lot of promos for it around. So
Mhm.
make sure you go check that out. And when you do, please do us a favor to support both Locked On Braves and Locked On Padres. Use sorare.com /locked on there. But let's get into our predictions for this series coming up, a 4-game series, your third straight even game set to begin the year. You've split the first two. Are the Padres going to split another one? Do they win this series? Do the Braves win it? What do you think, Javi?
I like the idea of, I just love following like narratives and how media works and how storylines and fan freakouts go. I think the Padres are going to get their butts kicked in this series, and I think it's going to be good for them. I'm going to I just think that with some of the struggles on the team, with the bullpen and the defense, I think that's going to last at least one more series, I guess, especially against this Atlanta team. And I think that with what I talked about before, which my not even conspiracy, but my ridiculous exaggeration that division's already over. I think that we're going to get a lot of like freakouts after this series. And then what better way to have the Mets and Padres playing after that, coming to face each other as both teams. Everyone's like, oh no, they're the great disappointments. The sky is falling. So I think that's what's going to happen. I think they will take a game. I'm not going to predict which starter necessarily, because I love how in baseball it'll be like, who's the Hall of Famer on the Braves? I forgot his name. The pitcher. I'm
John
blanking now.
Smoltz, Tom
Yeah,
Glavine, Greg
yeah. There
Maddux,
were
etc.
any of the like all of those guys will be the ones that the Padres would win against, right? And
Right.
then it'll be some guy you've never heard of, right?
Yeah.
That's like
That's the
38
way
and a
baseball
journeyman.
goes.
Yeah, that's the way baseball usually goes. I think that they take at least one game from this. I'm going to say the Friday one, just because Friday is a cool day of the week. But I think that it's going to be interesting. There's a lot of like prove it matchups, I think, for the Padres here. You've got Blake Snell. Don't be fooled by the 6.23 ERA. He still looked pretty good, a lot of whiffs and whatnot. It's just that some inherited runners were given up by the bullpen, but he's still very effective. But Braves are a smart team. I think they're going to attack him and they're going to say, we don't care if he's good. Let's just make it like 3 or 4 innings good. You know what I mean? This is a guy who could go 4 innings, no runs, and strike out 8. But I think the Braves are going to be like, let's get into this Padres bullpen. You know what I mean? Get rid of Snell, get the Snellzilla off the mound, and then you have Spencer Strider as well. So I think that that's one that they could definitely win. But I'm curious to see how the rest of that series goes with Nick Martinez. Is he going to start? Seth Lugo. That's where I think the questions arise for the Padres team. Although it might be really fun. I mean, this is in theory that Grisham has started off pretty well for the Padres this year. Actually, he's swinging a better bat, so I'd watch out for him. But then that nightmare lineup of Xander, Manny, and Soto, Manny might be due. So I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I think we might get some high-scoring games, especially as we get into the bullpen. Because I also know that Raisel Iglesias is hurt. Again, this team has like 80 bajillion pitcher injuries. It just does not matter. So it might get fun in the bullpen. That's my prediction.
Okay. Yeah, no, I like that. And I probably should have set you up with the pitching matchups before I set you up for a prediction here. That's on me.
Good.
But yeah, Blake Snell and Spencer Strider on Thursday. And then on a Friday, which is the one you predicted that the Padres will win, I think that's actually a good prediction because the Braves don't know who they're throwing on Friday at this point. That is to be determined against Nick Martinez. So I would definitely favor the Padres in that one. And I honestly, we've talked about it for days. I have no idea if it's going to be a bullpen game, what the Braves are going to do on Friday. On Saturday, Michael Wacha against Charlie Morton. And then Sunday night baseball, it's Seth Lugo, the starter, not the reliever now, versus Dylan Dodd, a rookie. So that one gives me a little bit of concern just because it's the Sunday night atmosphere for a rookie pitcher. Could that be a little overwhelming for him? His first time pitching at home for the Braves as well. Probably going to be a lot of nerves there for the rookie going up against a really, really good lineup. So that one makes me a little concerned, and the Friday night one. So it'll probably be that the Braves will win those two and then lose the one started by Strider and Morton, because like we said, that's the way that baseball goes. But I don't know. It's so easy to predict a split in a 4-game series, but I'll go with the Braves series win. I'll say that they get it done at home. You make me feel a little bit better about that, talking about the defensive deficiencies for the Padres, because I think that's one area, at least in this past series against the Cardinals, and I think overall the Braves are a great team defensively, so I think that gives them an edge. And I do like the Braves bullpen, even without Iglesias. They've been really sharp to start the year, but that Padres lineup, it is a really good one, so it should be very entertaining. Javi, thanks so much for joining the podcast. It's been a lot of fun. We need to do this more often, but let everybody know where they can find you, not just on Locked On Padres, but everywhere that they can find the great Javi Reyes.
Yeah, that's all right. Thanks so much, man. At Javipeno on Twitter, JAVIIPENO. A great Twitter handle, I know. Check that out for sure. If you don't like my nerdy stuff, which I sometimes don't always tweet about baseball on there, which people who follow me know, at LO_Padres. I love live tweeting the games and doing a bunch of silly stuff and just posting the same pictures of Ha-Seong Kim and Xander Bogaerts, basically. And then on YouTube, I have a pretty boring fit for this episode. Although I did get my hair cut. People who've been watching the show.
Yeah, nice fresh cut.
So you could look forward to that, I guess. But check that out at Locked On Padres on YouTube. And then I guess go check out Just Baseball, which is the place that I usually do some writing. I'm writing a very ridiculous thing on AJ Preller right now that I think should be a lot of fun, and something on Ryan Mountcastle So some random stuff for you guys to get teased about. So for sure, go check that out.
Yeah, go check out Javi again. He's very entertaining person and he's great at everything that he does there. Very intelligent about the game as well. So make sure you go check out Javi. Make sure you check out Locked On Padres. And thanks for making Locked On Braves and Locked On Padres your first listen of each and every day. Now go check out Locked On Fantasy Baseball. Let Matt and Dom help you win your league. Check out Locked On Fantasy Baseball wherever you get your podcast, just like the Locked On Braves and Locked On Padres. Go check out those podcasts there wherever you get your podcast. It will be available. Again, thanks for listening. Be sure to follow us. Follow the Braves on Twitter at @lockdown_Braves. You can follow me at Shortstop Ball. Also, make sure you subscribe to the podcast again wherever you get your podcast, and we will talk to you next time.